Alright, we're back. Today we have something kind of special. This is a gorgeous vintage handmade randonneur bike from 1981. Apparently handmade in Japan by Toei Cycles, who's still around, still making some of the nicest, lightest, most gorgeous bikes ever made. He's guessing about 81. It's still date coded in the old Japanese sort of calendar. It's gorgeous. It's got the old Nervex lugs from the 50s through early 70s. It's got hand-carved seat stay caps. It's got all the cool details, little built-in rear cable stop, the old Mayfat canny bosses, a bolt for like a sidewall dynamo, internal wiring for the dynamo, pops out up here for the lights and all this stuff. Very, very cool. Got a chain slap guard, little pins, vertical dropouts back when everything else is horizontal. Just craftsmanship, gorgeousness, cool logo. I love Toei's. I think they're the coolest. I've seen very few in person. I haven't really got to touch many. I think maybe I've got to do a Fender install in one or two over the years. And what we're going to do today is totally reasonable. Custom Fender install. So this bike's going to be riding like 33mm tires. He brought over some dummy wheels with some 38s. So these fenders are a little narrow, they're 45s. I think they'll fit all right with 38s, depending on the frame clearances. But this is a Toei and it's handmade, it's for this. These guys were building old rando bikes when no one else was building them anymore. So it's dimpled and has clearance, and it is made for fenders and 650B. So it should work. You got a couple Tanaka fender sets. These are very similar to the Velo Orange or the Honjos or the Simworks, which are just made by Honjo. Who knows, the same manufacturer might make all the Velo Oranges for the Tanakas, but I've mostly only seen the Tanakas. They don't look exactly like anybody else's. I don't know if they make for anybody else. We got a couple of sets. They're on clearance from Mary Sale from Soma, recently Mary Sales. So this one's pre-drilled. It has a whole hardware kit. And sometimes I really like pre-drilled because it makes my life a lot easier, and sometimes I really hate it because then none of the holes are where I want them. But this has the under fork crown hole. Man, look at that. It only sticks out like 4 or 5 inches. It's not even going to stick out past the rack. It's not going to stick out past the rando bag. It's not going to keep any water from spraying off your front wheel and flying right back up in your eyes. So maybe I'll use it, maybe I will not. He also brought another set of, oh, these ones are alloy smooth polish. I think these ones are stainless. That's the thing you gotta decide too, is what brand of fender fits your bike the best? What width is the best for your tires? You need more clearance than you think. A lot more. And what material? So these alloy ones are not drilled at all, which I like a lot better. But they are inches shorter than this already too short stainless one, which I like a lot less. So I'll probably open both sets and hold them up and play with them. I haven't done a lot of Tanakas. I probably haven't done a Tanaka set in a decade or more. I really did switch to Velo Orange. They're always in stock. They're more common. They make a lot of different sizes and widths. And I switched to Honjo for that same reason. Honjo makes even more sizes, even more widths, shapes, depths. The Honjos are also usually a lot longer, so you get a lot more coverage, which is what fenders are for, is giving you lots of coverage when it's raining and horrible out. Why would you have short fenders that don't do anything? You want the longest fenders possible, which is not the mode now. Now the Simworks ones are all made by Honjo, but most of them are made several inches shorter for gravel or whatever, and not rain. I want that long fenders. I know a lot of old bike mechanics, they buy 2 fender sets and use the rear on the front and use the rear on the rear. So use 2 rears and never use the front so you can get more coverage. And you can trim it down a little bit if you wanted. So, who knows? Also, metal fenders, unlike plastic fenders, have a rolled edge. So it's a flat piece of steel that wraps over, and then the edge rolls up under and tucks. So these edges are several millimeters on those fenders. So if you got a 45mm tire, you're like, oh, I'll put a 47mm fender. No, you won't, because you're losing 3 or 4 millimeters on both sides. Fenders also sometimes are pretty shallow, so you don't have to worry about the tire clearance as much, but some of the fenders are kind of deep. They stick way down, so this rolled edge is, instead of floating up above the tire, it's coming right down onto the fattest part of the tire. So you get the fattest part of the tire and the rolled edge, and they get real tight real fast. So there's a lot of stuff you really got to pay attention to when doing metal fender installs. We're also going to Rinko this fender, which is the old Japanese way of bike packing. So what we have to do is cut this back fender in half back here so it doesn't stick out any farther than the brakes or anything else. So you can just pull the back part of the fender and the stays off and tuck them up inside the frame. And then you can pull the front wheel off, and usually people take the whole fork out with the wheel and tuck it up inside the frame to make your bike as small as possible to get into a backpack. So you can take it on the trains in Japan for bike touring. You know, this is the same way like the Canadians and stuff, there are a lot of folding bike companies make their folding bikes. And this is true for like Canadian brands. But they make them so they can fold up and fit underneath the standard size seats on Canadian railway trains. So you know, put some thought into stuff is cool. So don't just assume stuff's going to work. Figure out what works and what doesn't. So we'll do fender install in Rinko. Aluminum fenders are nice because they're pretty easy for the hacksaw to bite into for the Rinko. Stainless sucks because it's extra hard. And it is hard to get your hacksaw started, and it's real easy to slip and scrape and just destroy this nice, smooth, polished finish, which we don't want to do. We want this to look as nice as possible. But I really might go with these stainless ones. Really might. Let's see what the back one's like. Here's the back one for the aluminum. I'm going to hold it up over the stainless. Yeah, this is definitely a few inches shorter too. Oh, I wish they were longer, not shorter. I don't know, let's open it up. This one's the only one with any stays and hardware. Looks like the VO stuff. We can always steal it. The next thing I'll say, if you want a pro fender install with really nice fender lines, you need to use the wheels and tires you're planning on running. Or a dummy set of wheels and tires have all the same dimensions, same rim width, same tire size. To make sure you can line these fenders up just right so they're nice, even clearance all the way around the tire. I usually like about 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch. I usually set bikes up for like 20 millimeters or 25 millimeters, depending, which sounds totally insane, but you gotta think this fender right here is already 20 millimeters deep. I always start with the front because the fork crown is often the most limiting factor on a bike. So we might have to start with the front. And we're gonna have to dimple this hole on the top here so it can come under the crown and come up. Like you have to, I usually just bolt it on and just bend the fender. But people make dimpling tools and do weird stuff and hammer and wood blocks, and I have that. Or bolt on like a Oki headset press, a couple big washers and nuts on like a piece of all thread. You can bend that. But usually I just bolt it on. So we'll see. We'll try that first. If it doesn't work, we'll take it off and hammer on it. And then the rear usually has more clearance. So I'll try to hold these up before I start drilling holes and mounting stuff. Because it sucks if you go and you do the rear and it's like perfect and the clearances look great and you go to the front. The front's way tighter and it's down like 8 millimeters or 6 millimeters. Something noticeable. You have to come back and redo the rear and ovalize the holes a little bit and add some spacers. And so it's usually best to do the front. So let's play with these. He bought this rack from me on eBay a while ago. That's why I was like, hey, I remember you. You do stuff. I want to do metal fenders and Rinko. Is there anyone in Portland who does that and doesn't charge an arm and a leg? And I was like, nah, bro, there isn't. And I was like, well, I'm making YouTube videos. This would be a cool video. I will come out of retirement for your bike to make this video. And since you bought this rack. So this rack fits the front of this toy perfect. He already had it on. It was a little bit wonky. I just bent it a little bit. He wants me to make sure and bend it until it's like perfectly straight. So we'll do that. And on the front, I also like to hard mount the fender onto the rack. It's got a little threaded boss on the bottom, because that way it's got the point back here, so 1 point, underneath the crown 2 points, and the rack 3 points. Just like the back fender has 1 point, 2 point, 3 points. So a lot of people don't do that with the front fender, and the front fender's always flapping in the breeze and wiggling and wonking and driving you nuts. So mounting it to a rack is totally pro if you know what rack you're going to use and have it and can test fit it and only have to drill that hole once in the right place. It's a bummer if you're going to switch it. I did once have a guy, Gino Zand, cool Gino, the famous Paul Gino mounts named after him. He had a box dog 650B rando bike with fenders and all that stuff, and it had some janky rack. Oh, like a Nitto, or like this some off-the-shelf rack. And it was drilled and mounted to the fender, but he wanted a custom handlebar bag rack from me with custom detachable lowriders. And so I had to magically bend that front rack and nail it so that the hole would line up in the exact same spot as the other rack that was on it before. And I did it on the first try, and I was very proud of myself because it was like maybe the second or third handlebar bag rack I ever made. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm going to open these up and take an inventory of the parts, and we're going to play with it. Something else I should mention is this toei has an extra hard step. The front eyelets, double eyelets, are drilled and tapped, just like a normal old bike. It might be M6, which could be hard. They're oversized. The hardware might not fit. But the rear is not. The rear is machined like an old French bike. So the dropout itself is like machined down, so it's extra thin and there's no threads. So it's made for a Durema style bolt to go through with a nut on the backside. I don't think this hardware is really going to allow for that. We might have to do some mixing and some matching and figure something out. Renee Hurst probably sells that stuff. I always order that if I have to. I have some old beat up Velo Orange fenders that I'm going to cut down to make the little Rinko bits I need. And maybe I can steal the Duremas off of that for this. So we shall see. Okay, awkward camera angle. But here I got it all laid out. I also noticed on the back of the hardware it says these are alloy too, so maybe I was just thrown off by the extra weight of the hardware kit and the tinted plastic packaging compared to the translucent plastic. So maybe they're both alloy. That's great. I'm definitely going to use the longest stuff. This makes my life a lot easier. So I opened up the hardware kit, and we got some stuff. So you got your stays. You've also got a Durema bolt. So this bolt will go through the fork crown if you had a brake mounted, or the rack bolt will hold this. It'll hang down onto this rubber washer, this hard metal washer, which goes underneath the crown. And it's got a big M6 nut. It also comes the more common, just L bracket stay. So this could bolt to the fender with this provided screw and nut. And this will go to the back side of the fork crown. It's much more traditional in fenders. There's also a rear bracket kind of like it that you can line up and bolt through your brake boss or bridge or whatever, and then bend this bracket down around the fenders and tighten it up on the inside. We probably won't use either of those. We'll probably use the Durema. And then it's got these little looper dudes. So this is like a double capture nut. This will go on the inside of the fender. And this little looper dude goes on the outside of the fender to pinch the stay to the fender. And we'll probably use these cute little button head bolts for that. Or if they're too long, I might go find some that are slightly shorter. Got 4 little star washers, which I will use against these P-clamps. These P-clamps hold the bracket to your eyelet, the dropout eyelet. And I'll probably use the 4 regular bolts for that, so I can actually get them tight enough and get a bigger wrench on here, a little more purchase. I really don't like using water bottle bolts for anything other than water bottles because the head is just so small. You really can't get a big enough wrench in here and get them tight enough for most things. And then it also came with 3, or is there 4? The 4th, one of these screw bolts. And this is probably really what is made for the fenders. But the screw head isn't really any taller than these button heads. So I'll have to decide if I want to use these screws or not. Button heads are really more handy than a screw because you have little Allen wrenches on all of your bike multi-tools you take with you places and do things with. And not all of them have screwdrivers. So we will see how I feel. There's no instructions with this at all. One advantage of the Velo Orange kit is that it comes with instructions. One disadvantage of the Velo Orange kit is the instructions are completely and totally wrong. They were written for Honjo fenders probably 20 years ago. All the bolts are different. The lengths of the bolts are different. And if you follow those instructions, you will give yourself a hard time. They're a good starter, but they're not perfect. I used to threaten for years that I'd rewrite the instructions for the Velo Orange fenders and mail them to Velo Orange for free. And I wish I would have, honestly. I don't know if I'd ever even care to use them. So we have all the hardware. It's even got 4 extra little bolts. We got the front, we got the rack, we got the stuff. It's time to stop dilly-dallying and get this build started. All right, we're gonna start on the front. And even though these are the wrong size tires, they're what I brought. And they're 38s and a little low on pressure. Worst case, your fender's gonna fit too big, which is a good thing for clearance. So anything that can get up in there can get out instead of trapping and rubbing against your tire and grinding into your frame and causing all sorts of annoying noise and problems. It's a pretty nice wheel set. It's got a real clean set of like 7 or 8 speed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speed Shimano 105 front hubs, that like kind of ghost gray. Sort of getting this jammed up against my trash can here to keep from flopping around too much. Ghost gray hubs to some nice Araya rims that look brand new. Yeah, this custom built for this bike and other bike. Come to the front and check my clearances. It's got clearances on the side. It's got too much clearance on the top. I'm gonna double check this pre-drilled one against the not drilled one. Yeah, look at this. You got 4 or 5 extra inches. I'm using the pre-drilled one. It's got the hole so far up. I have a Sharpie to help me. I'm leaving the bag on the fender as long as possible to help me. I got a bunch of blue painter's tape so I can put it on stuff and mark stuff up and hopefully not destroy anything. Try and do this without scruffing it. God, that is, look at that. Just like, it makes me unhappy. This is my bike, I would order new fenders, but for Rinko it makes sense maybe to have them a little shorter anyway. It's going to poke out of the bag and cause you as much problems. And for, you know, not touring and heavy downpour, a little shorter is probably fine. We are just going to go for it. Otherwise I'd be moving them up, and then all of a sudden you don't get the toe clearance you need. I'll probably put both wheels on, put this on the ground and really look at it that way, and see what I really think. And if you see, this all the way up is way too much clearance in here. So there's just a gap. You can see daylight. I don't want any daylight. I don't want it sitting down on the gum wall like this either. That's crazy. And you can see the arc of the fender looks to poke up here and here. So I want to get it up high enough where the whole thing's about even. Well, you really can't. I'm going to have to re-radius these fenders, and that's a good thing I guess to have to cover, is that these fenders don't make a perfect half-round C-shape that match the tire at all. They've definitely got huge gaps of daylight here and here, and then mostly matching here. So there's a few ways to re-radius fenders. Smart ways to use a piece of nice soft carpet and use a old tennis ball or a baseball. You can roll it in here, and that's going to widen the center section. If it does that, it's going to pull the whole fender into a tighter C. But I usually just kind of do it on my body, and I usually do it with a hand and just barely massage it just a little bit, coming around, sort of pushing my thumb, sort of pulling my fingers. Just massage just a little. Sometimes a little bit does a lot, sometimes a little bit doesn't do anything. Let's check that again. Still, it didn't really do much. Try a little harder. Usually do this without the plastic on, but opening this up, suck everything down and in. I definitely moved it a little bit. It's definitely a lot closer, but it's still real big. Another tip, so you do actually want it to be a little bit tighter down here and a little bit looser everywhere else. You want this to be kind of the tightest spot, but barely. I do want to maintain my pretty fender line, because anything the tire sucks up, any rocks, pine needles are the worst, leaves, just road debris that can get in the fender. You want to make sure it's got plenty of room to escape and get out. It doesn't get trapped in a tighter spot anywhere, which is usually under the fork crown. More. And the plastic might be slowing me down a little bit. That is looking a lot better already. Oh yeah. I like that. We might come do a little bit more too. I'm gonna take the plastic off like an idiot. Make sure they still look pretty. See it, I can physically see they're wider where I worked them. I'll work them a little bit more. Bonus for this is also making them wider, which will give you more tire clearance. Here we bashing the fork blades, so I've got 4 or 5 millimeters each side, so I'm not going to rub on the fork blades and squeal and do crazy stuff. I like it. The Dorama is definitely too short. Oh, that's right, God, it's like this. This is like totally nuts. So options are using that L bracket, which will be ugly and crazy, or to do the hardest thing. Well, a couple versions. So there's JP Weigel, the famous frame builder, who does a lot of this kind of stuff. He will take this Dorama, which is just a brass chrome-plated bolt, and he will braze some more threads on to make this thing even longer. I am not going to do that. What I do is something a little crazier. So the underside of the steer tube, if there's nothing in there, which there isn't, oh, I can't really do that with a through rack. So I was going to say what I often do is take a 1-inch star nut for like an old style 1-inch threadless post, and hammer the star nut in on the bottom. And then you can just run any old bolt you want up and put any amount of spacers you want in. This we won't be doing that because there is this hole in the crown for the rack bolt to go through, so we can't have that star nut in the way. We need this Dorama to bolt on. So there is another tricky option, which I think JP Weigel also did, which is that this is a 6x1 thread like most bike stuff. You know what else is 6x1? Recessed brake nuts. So here are some tricks. I went and found a recessed brake nut, and I went and found some other stuff that's going to help. So I have some other of these little spacers that come with some other different brands of fenders. So here's a much thicker one, which might come in handy. Here's another thin one. Here's a leather washer. So people always want leather washers all over everything that they do. Do you really want leather washers on fenders? No, not really. I do like to use these where I mount the front fender to the bottom side of the rack, usually. I don't want them on Doramas, I don't want them on stays. They'll swell, they'll shrink, bolts will come loose, fall off. On the Velo Orange fenders, I give you enough of these to put under every one of the bolts that holds the stay in place, but the bolts are not long enough. So you can't get the nylock on the nut, which is this white stuff. It's a nylock plastic ring that sort of makes the bolt turn into a thread tap, and it comes through there and it cuts into that plastic and cuts the threads, and the heat makes it expand, and that thing shrinks and it locks the nut on so it won't fall off. If you try and put a bunch of these leather washers underneath everything on Velo Orange fenders that the nylock doesn't reach, that nut will always come loose and fall off. Honjos, the bolts are longer and you can get away with stuff, but Honjos usually come sometimes thin plastic, translucent ones, or sometimes thin black plastic ones. So I usually buy a bunch of these leather washers from wherever. I think Grambois in Japan makes a 4mm thick one. The VOs are all 2. They also make a 1mm thick one. So I used to stock a bunch of all these sizes so I can mix and match and shim things just right. So here are some examples of recessed brake nuts. These come on the back of most caliper brakes. They come in all the different lengths. We have to figure out, it's a little trickier, so we have to figure out what's the right length for this. And then we'll thread this dude on, which makes it quite a bit taller now, so we can get as many spacers as we actually need in here. But this isn't a lot of lip. So I actually went to a hardware store years ago and bought up all the washers I could find that would give me the lip I want. So these washers are made to exactly fit out of the recessed nut, so the little edge of the recessed nut can grab the washer and give it some extra support on the fender. I got some smaller ones too, but I like these big fat fender washers. I want as much purchase power as possible. I've also got this. So this is just an aluminum bent to shape with a hole drilled in it and double-sided sticky tape on it. This is comes in most of the Velo Orange fender kits now, so it stiffens up where the fender bolts on under the crown because people will crack them. I think it's really the rear bridge. It's where they crack most of the time. You just use a tiny little washer, a tiny little bolt, a giant unsupported fender. So I always save these. I don't need them. Velo Orange kits usually come with like 2 or 3 of these. I usually only use 1. So I have this as well. I can drill it out bigger for this nut if we want. But probably just this big washer will be just fine. That's all the stock Diremas come with. It's just a big washer and a spacer. If I want to, I can even take this out and just drill it out. But these are already the right size. Don't have to fight drills at all. So the first step is, this is the bolt holding the front rack on. We don't need to fight this whole rack and situation now. We can do that later. But we do want this bolt to be sitting in there to hold the Direma in place. So the Direma has a hole in it. This comes up through the crown. Put the bolt in just like we would whether there's a rack on it or not. And now, more or less, it is just hanging out, just temporary, holding this dude in place. I'm definitely going to replace this bolt. It is not long enough for what I want to do. You can see the little threads hanging down. We can test fit this dude. And all the way up, if we just want to put a nut on it in the spacers, you can see it's going to be way too high. I want it like no daylight. So I definitely am going to need probably just one of the shorter brake nuts. It doesn't have to be very long, it looks like. So I'm just going to test fit it. I'm going to use the stock big fat washer underneath the crown. I'm going to use this fatter plastic spacer I got. But this is going to come up through the fender and into this washer, so I'm going to have to drill out this washer so that this bolt can get through. So I got a drill, I got a set of bits, I got this thing. I'm going to try and find a bit that is at least a little bit bigger than this doodad. And of course, I'm missing every one ever. Looks like 1964s would work. I'm just putting it in the drill bit hole, and this fits in the 1964s hole really nice. Of course, that drill bit is missing. It's probably dull. I probably threw it away. I should probably find a better bit set. Ooh! This one is a couple of steps down, so it's only one size too big, 5/16. That is way better. Alright, so I just clamped it in the vise and ran the drill bit through it. And now, the brake nut slides right on through, no problemos. So let's test our little theory. Recessed brake nut. Big fat fender washer, big fat spacer, and threading on. Hey, alright, now all I gotta do is put the fender in here and see what we can see, and then after that we might have to add or take out spacers. I also found this giant bag I got recently of excess Honjo hardware, stuff off custom fender installs that left a bunch of brackets off. Mostly all the stuff we'll always leave off and never need. But there are some of the Honjo Diremas in here. So sometimes you can check these, and sometimes, you know, one will be longer or shorter than the other. Honjo one looks about the same. Probably not useful right now, but having extra fender hardware, I save all the old stuff because you never know what you're going to need in a custom fender install because you're always trying to do weird and wacky stuff. In the spirit of trying not to scratch this guy up, I'm going to take this all the way out, cut a few inches, this plastic off, slide it back in. That was not enough plastic, alright. I got some painter's tape. It's not going to damage anything, it's not going to leave a bunch of goo on the fender. If it does leave a little bit of goo, some Goo Gone or ceramic alcohol will take it right off. So it's not super strong. It's just some dollar store painter's tape. But I want to kind of tape this plastic on a little bit so it'll stay put. and hopefully not scratch through the painter's tape. Put this on. I used to wing this, just raw dog it, and I barely ever screwed a fender up. And I had some extra fenders, and I did a lot of the same sizes all the time, and I had a few that I screwed up, so I had extra fenders. So it was fine, but I haven't done this in 5 or 6 years, and I don't want to screw this up. So we're not gonna. A little tape, little stuff. Now once this is all taped up, this fender nut's a little bit bigger too. Drill this fender. And put a couple extra pieces of tape out of paranoia. Just in case it walks. It is a drill and it's made for making holes in metal, so if this does walk or you're lazy or do a bad job here, you're definitely going to scratch the crap out of this fender. The only saving grace is that it's mostly hit into the fork crown. And, you know, when I was really paranoid about something rare or expensive, I would add several layers of tape, add a few layers of Gorilla Tape, tape some leather down on top, you can do whatever you need to do. So let's make this hole the next size. Gentle. Just gently holding it, going real slow, real gentle. Okay, alright, now it is the next size, and now this little dude. Now drilling holes and stuff leaves little burrs, just little metal splinters around the edges of things. You can probably ignore them and get away with it 9 times out of 10, but they also act like, imagine tightening a nut and bolt down and there's a small pebble. That pebble's going to hit, the other side's going to get tight, the pebble's going to stay, and then you rock it a little bit and it's going to move or come loose, and it's going to come loose. There's a couple of tools for that. This is a tapered reamer, these are like 15 bucks. So these are sharp cutting edges, and they're on a taper, so I can put them in here and just gently widen that hole. Probably get the burrs out. This is a deburring tool. It's a little deburring tool on a handle, and this will spin around as you go, so you can put this in stuff. And this isn't going to change the size, this is just going to clean up those sharp edges. That tapered reamer changes size real quick if you're not careful. And now there are no more metal splinters, sharp edges, and little bits of metal hanging on. That's a lie. I felt one. So with the deburring tool, which is, again, only a few bucks, now I have no more sharp metal, the hole's not a bigger size. This guy fits right in. I almost wonder if I want a smaller one of these. I save all the brake bolts, because different sizes do different things, and sometimes you want one that's 10 millimeters long, and sometimes that's too short, and you need a 12, but a 14 is too long, so I save these guys. Ooh, here's a pretty titanium one with a bigger head, but I ain't doing that to nobody. That's probably about the shortest one. Oh no, here's one's exactly the same. Yeah, this is the shortest one. We'll stick with it. I've definitely done this before and had to take it to the grinder or take it to a hacksaw and cut 4 or 5 millimeters off of one of these. So custom fender installs are not easy, bro. Not easy. But luckily, I never said they were. Got my big fat washer. That washer is going to deform and mangle the inside of this fender. I'm going to go with the skinnier washer so I get less deformities. So it's still a big fat fender washer. Still going to give me a little extra purchase. But less likely to deform the fender. I'm going to bend this fender anyways. But this means you'll get it all in there and bolt it down. You have all these air gaps. So you'll tighten them a little bit and they'll wiggle and come loose again. So we've got to get rid of all these shapes and gaps, but also not cause problems. Get my 5 up in there again. Gently start. There are other things we can use as spacers. Here is just a metal drawer I have of spacers. These are just aluminum tubes that are really common on plastic bike fenders for spacing them out around disc brake mounts and stuff. So you can bolt this all the way long bolt and get your fender stay out wide. These are common. I save them all the time. I cut them down for stuff all the time. Here's one that's cut down maybe the right length, maybe a little bit too long. Here's a couple of other short, weird spacers. Spacers are invaluable. I save every spacer I find, ever. Got a regular wine cork I could drill out and cut down to whatever thickness I want. Problem with the wine cork is you'll sometimes mangle them, get them in, get it tight enough. So sometimes I'll cut 2 of these, one for test fitting, one for actually finish assembly. Another totally overlooked and amazing source of spacers is V-brake parts. So these old V-brake nuts to hold your V-brake pads on, these are M6, so if you need a spacer for an M5 bolt, like the back fender, these are amazing little spacers. They already have a little cone and taper. They look great. I do the fat end down and the skinny end up. I'll probably use this underneath the rack or on the back if I need the spacer. Also the actual V-brake BB style hardware. The little cup and cones. These are great. They make these in all different widths, and sometimes they're good for stuff that's a little goofy or off center. You can sort of run the bolt through here and let the little BB take up a little bit of that off centerness. And they're fairly good looking. It's just all sort of sandblasted looking alloy. So this is a great source. You can stack 4 or 5 or 10 of these up if you want. But if you're going to do that, I usually go right for the big disc brake mount hardware. So now you see why I charge so much to install fenders. I'm charging $150 plus basically $100 for the Rinko, and I've already realized that I need to raise my prices. I'm way more than an hour into this already. I'm going to start charging $250 for this plus Rinko, which is, I'm guessing, the most expensive in town, but also it's been 4 or 5 years to check prices, and this is real hard. Once you start doing this and realizing how hard it is to get a good job, I bet you people are starting to charge a lot more, or just they stop doing it, which usually happens. So let's try this little guy. I'm probably going to have to drill this guy out too then. That bolt comes right through that fender. Yeah, I'm going to drill this out too. That's not fun. BRB. Lol, this other one already had a bigger hole in it. So I just drilled this guy out. This one already had a bigger hole. Didn't even need to do that. But you can see I've gone from made for an M5 bolt to made for whatever this recessed nut is, 5/16. So what is that? About 8 mil. Also going to take this deburring tool and just knock it down a little bit. No burrs. All right, one more time into the void. I am thinking push this kind of reamed out rubber guy up over this brake bolt. Now it's real tight on here, and this is going to do a couple of things for me. One, it's going to hold this whole situation together so I'm not fighting 500 things. And it's going to look right, and it's going to make this spacer a lot more subtle. Let's try again. Put this stock nut jammer up here for this to tighten against. Put this guy all on there. Grab this M5. Let's twist again like we did last summer. Alright. Now we can get this guy pretty tight. It's going to deform the front fender a little bit. It's going to deform these washers into place a little bit. It's really just deforming this black rubber washer. That's not cool. That looks terrible. Okay, let's try the wheel again. Custom fender installs get wheels in and out 500 times. You can see that, the angle of the head tube changes the geometry, so this is tightened into the bottom of the crown. It's actually at this angle. So you can see the fender's all jacked up back here and all tight right here, so we're just gonna bend it. And now it sits about where we want it. I might say balls to that black spacer. But I do like the height of it. I might want this even longer. We might really go with this cut down tube that's even longer. Yep, so now I'm gonna go drill this out. Oh. All right, I took this little guy and I drilled it out, but just one side, just about, probably 3/4 of the way through, honestly. But that's a lot deeper that nut is. It does not have to go all the way through. It's just gotta take up the slack for that nut. Let's pull this all apart and do it again. This is why I like champagne corks, because you just drill it once, hacksaw down to the size you want, bolt it in, and it's really pretty much good. I wish I had me a bottle of champagne right now. Maybe I'll go to the store and get one. Just get real wasted in the middle of filming this video. How about that come out great? This rubber washer is not doing it for me. I'm probably just going to go no washer. I had some extra leather sitting around, which I don't think I do. Might cut my own little leather washer. That'd be cute. Alright, fender washer, recess nut, up and in, old spacer out, new drilled spacer on. This one is also hacksawed, so it is not perfectly straight. So I can literally turn this spacer to align the fender. Sort of like a ball bearing hardware, like if the shallow spot's at the front, it's going to push the back down. Put the shallow spot at the back, it's going to lift the back up. So that's a little trick if you want to get really advanced or turn a mistake like a not very square cut into a feature. And why wouldn't you want to do that? A little Sharpie mark on the tallest side. Just in case I'm like, oh, this needs to be different. Put it right on the back. Got my handy dandy M5. Also, if you noticed, I'm sweating profusely because it's like 90 degrees today. Instantly I love this better. It's nice and tight, sitting right in there. The line right to the back. Adjust it, we can bend it, everything's going to go where we want instead of flopping around on that loosey-goosey black rubber washer. All the way up. Now we can really bend this guy. Oh yeah. Now that looks pretty good. We're not going to see any daylight at all. We saw a lot of rubber showing. That is what we want. Phase 2, we're going to put the back wheel in and check the fender clearance and see. Maybe the back is so much tighter. A lot of frames are like that. Looking at you, Rivendell, 6 inches of clearance in the back and the front being at least 6 millimeters too short of the crown. A lot of frames fit different. Maybe these actually have to come down 4 more millimeters because that's all the back will clear. We don't want the fenders to look different. We don't want the back to have daylight showing, the front not to. So we're going to check the back. And then if everything looks good, we'll come back and we'll do the stays. I have a bunch of tricks and tips for those too. Don't worry, I'm here to drive you nuts. All right, back tire is on. It's hot out, hydrate. Yeah, so this nice handmade toei totally has the fender clearance we need. We'll have to make some spacers for this too to get it low enough. Maybe this will be exactly the right amount to use those brake bolt spacers off of V-brakes. I love that trick. But look at this. This fender fits even worse than the front. So down here, touching the bridge. Here, touching the bridge. Too much, way too much. So we're really going to have to reshape this fender. I'd swear this fender's for 700C. It's cray-cray. But it says 650B by 45 alloy right on it. So this fender is going to be a bit of a fight. We're also going to do a real trick. I showed the customer this. He had never seen this before. That's what I do on all my rando bikes. On anybody's serious bike, unless they detail it. Most fenders have a hole, a little slot down here for the rear bridge. I ignore that. Instead of doing that, I'm going to hang this down a couple of inches. And what this is going to do, having the fender come way too low, is that all the mud and splatter coming off the tires and hit this fender and fall down, instead of shooting all over your chain rings. This is going to keep your chain rings and your chain super clean, like shockingly clean. Like you've never seen them so clean after riding like all winter on a really long ride. So we're going to drill at least one new hole in this for that, which is going to make this seem a little high, but I honestly wouldn't change it anyways because it's going to be the right proportion from the end of the holes, from the logo to the holes. We're just going to have a little less fender in the back. So this needs a bunch of massaging. It's cool. That test fit told us everything we need to know. And now we can come back to this side. Drop this baby out. And I'm going to cut some of this plastic away. Being careful not to do more harm than good with these scissors. Some people are not coordinated at all and probably shouldn't even try stuff like this. I've definitely seen some people just punch new holes in the plastic through the old holes, bolt everything together, then tear the plastic away at the end. Probably fine. Okay, dokie. Now this is a little tricky. Gravity, sometimes you just turn the stand and change gravity. At least the headset's good. Real nice and smooth, just a little crusty boner. I'm going to push this into the tool board a little bit so it won't move. So we can really see what we're doing. So we've got the two holes right here. We got a little double nut back, a little clippy front, and the stay. And I'm going to use these water bottle boss style bolts. Go through the front of here, through the back of here. Some bikes, some modern bikes, we even come with like little pre-cut out stickers and stuff to put on here so you don't mar stuff. But use it as a sticker. I don't know. This doesn't, it's fine. None of this stuff's sharp, we probably won't cry. Why are you being a brat? Stuff's being a brat, take it off and get it where you can see it. And make sure everything's cool. Sometimes, yeah, threads are mangled or bungled right from the factory. Oh, that starts. It goes right in. It's just telling me that I'm a boner. I've got me my 3-way. It's my favorite tool ever. This is the smaller size one that has the 3 on it for water bottle boss bolts. And this will make my life easier. Hang that on. Hang it on the right way. It's got to pinch the stay against the fender, so gotta have this loop facing out. We're just going to try and get this top one started. This is nice. This is like what Velo Orange did when they switched to the double diorama's, or maybe before. There's two, so blue. There's 2 little lines on there, so you can center. In theory, they're right in the middle of the bend, so you can center this right on here. If you put these things off, that is adding weird tension, and your fender will be all wonky and will not want to bolt down. It's going to try and shoot out to one side, so you really do want to get it centered on this U. It is a not just aesthetic step, but it's an actual importante step. I'm wiggling this because I want to be able to see that line on both sides and know that it's more or less centered. I can kind of look down here and see there's a big gap on this side. It's all tight on this side, so it's probably not centered. I want it to look the same on both sides. And if it's giving you a hard time, loosen this up and wiggle it. Get it low working tension, something I talk about a lot. So you're not trying to get it tight, but you don't want it so loose it's going to fall off. You want it a little bit tight to where it'll sort of hold in place, but you can move it. So it's not falling, so it's loose enough to move, but tight enough to sort of hold in place where you want it while you're fighting it. All right. Come off. Let's come back here. So we can tighten those up anytime we want. This little nut cert's going to hold the nut so the nuts can't spin, so we can just tighten it from the backside. It's going to hold itself tight. Those threads do poke out way too much, 5 or 6 threads. This fender fit's too tall, that's fine. We could get some shorter bolts in the future if we want. If this ever rubs the tire or anything, but this bike has so much clearance built in, it will probably never touch in a million years, no matter what. Wheel is in, I'm turning it so the quick release is not in the way of these threads. Turn this guy up. What we want is it to come right up, fender to sit right straight. These guys to gently sit here. But you don't just want to tighten these down. That causes real problems. So what we're going to do will cause weird tension issues. So what we're going to do is bend these stays. Right now this U is very U'd. I'm going to put a tube on here, mark it about where I want it, and I'm going to go meep, and bend it in. So these stays aren't coming out this V, they're just going to gently kiss the dropout. It's going to line right up and touch it. This will solve a bunch of tension issues and fitting issues. You build fenders under a bunch of tension, and some jerk at the bike rack smacks their pedal into your fender stay and bends it. All of a sudden this side's got no tension, this side's got a bunch of tension, all the things go bong and spring in, your fender's going to be rubbing your tire. It's just like a little love tap. And you're like, hey man, uncool bro. We're going to get these to kiss. We want to do the same on both sides. So I got my Sharpie, I got my tape measure, sort of eyeball a line coming from that dropout back. Probably want it about here. You can also bend them out a little bit. Let's say 10 centimeters from the end. So marking both sides at 10 centimeters. Now we gotta bend these dudes. Now people always let tools hold them back. Like, oh, I have to have a special tool for this or that. It's not true. Here's like a $600 swage lock tubing bender. Have I used this to do this? Absolutely. Let's put it on there. Here's like a cheap like $10 auto parts store tubing bender. Sort of put it on there and go, sure. This is probably more trouble than it's worth. You just need anything hollow and tubular. So here's an old mountain bike handlebar. This would probably work. What I got really in the habit of using and really liking is an old chainstay off a bike. So this one's real fat and weird. I don't have the one I used to use. It was a real skinny old road bike one. I'm going to deburr this real quick too. But I did cut this off a bike for this purpose exactly. So I can stick this dude on here, go right to that line, and just holding it with this hand, pushing with this hand, just give it a little U-bend. Now it comes out at an angle and then gets flat to kiss that dropout. I've definitely bent it too much, I can see from this angle. So we'll have to, it's dramatic for the video, I guess. So come to this other side and just give it a little boop. And now it kisses the dropout. This is lined up perfectly flush with that eyelet on that side. This side's too much, so I'm just gonna just give a little squeeze back. No problems. Totes gorgeous. Now to clear the dropout and the eyelet and all this stuff, we will probably come down. So these are definitely too long now. So we got our R-clips. Put these bad boys on and hold them up right where it's going to be. I'm going to take this Sharpie again. We're all held up. Our fender line looks pretty good. R-clips right over the dropout. I'm actually right below it, kind of lined up vertically with it. I'm going to cut these. This is a couple of extra millimeters showing. So we have to do some adjusting. We can. So you can see here's my original mark from my bend, my new mark, my new cut line. And this is 2 or 3 millimeters too long, which is totally fine. Leaving these uncut, they stick all the way out, and in the way of the dropout and the quick release and all that, it's not legit. Don't do it. Guys always do it. They're lazy. We're going to cut this. Now you can take this off the bike after you get both sides marked and take it to a hacksaw. It takes like 3 seconds with a hacksaw, then I'll take a little sandpaper and clean it up. But I've been using like a miniature tubing cutter a lot for this lately, so I might do that because that doesn't have to come off the bike at all. Okay, so these are some tubing cutters. I got this one at a garage sale for $2. It's huge. It has a little mini teeny tiny one, probably $4 or $5 at an auto parts store. It's real handy. Like I said, you can take this off, hacksaw it, and file and trim it, or take the grinder around the end. You can take bolt cutters and cut this off, and it's going to be a real sharp end. You're going to stab yourself. It's going to suck. Don't do it. It's a little $5 tubing cutter. Totally worth it. Especially if you think you're going to do more than one set of metal fenders in your life. If you've gotten so nerdy, you're doing a set of metal fenders, you're going to do more. So you might as well spend $5 on this tiny tubing cutter. And this comes in handy for lots of little tubing. I was using this for cutting all the brake lines and fuel lines on my truck when I was making them and stuff. So tighten it on. We're just going to go twist, twist, twist. Until it gets a little looser, then we'll just tighten it a little bit, and then twist, twist, twist. Tighten it a little bit. And eventually it'll be tight enough this thing will just kind of snap right off. Eventually. Oh, there it goes. Tighten it with a little twist, and off it came. So now you can see the little stay came off. It's got a little cut end where it kind of snapped the center off. And it's got a little bit of a lip. And usually these, if you do it one way, you'll have a lip. If you do it the other way, you won't have a lip. I never remember which one. I just lucked out with this. This side's nice and smooth. It's cut real flush. It's totally done. You could take this to a bench grinder or a Dremel or a little sandpaper and round the tip and smooth it all out and go real crazy like a show bike. But really this is a nice enough, flat enough cut finish. It's cool. Next, we're going to see these bolts from Fiber M6 like I thought. Oh yeah, M6, that falls right in. So next, I have to go find a couple M6 bolts, and I do not know if they will fit in here. It's pretty loosey-goosey. They might. We'll hope. Otherwise, we'll have to ream these out a little bit too. Ah, custom. Here are some other truth bombs. So I went and grabbed an M6 bolt. I found a matching pair of brand new stainless M6s. They have the same knurled little heads, look just like the M5s we'll probably end up using on the back. The little P-clip is big enough to fit an M6. It's awesome. Usually I tell everyone to always use washers under bolts to distribute load. I don't do that with these P-clips. Washers, especially this oversized M6, end up hitting them weird, end up stretching out. You can stretch these out and then the fenders pull out too easy. These are kind of designs the fenders can pull out. If your fender crumples, you get a wreck, it catches on something, instead of throwing you off the bike, like yanking an e-brake in that spot, the fenders can pop out of this and crumple and bend and not make you wreck. So they're sort of designed to pull out, but I don't want them so loose they pull out and just move on their own no matter how tight you get them. So I don't use washers here. If you had a real small, star lock washer right here, that'd probably be okay. These have some Loctite on them, so that is probably enough. I have not checked these yet for a bolt, see if a bolt goes in nice and easy. We'll do that right now. If they don't, a lot of times in old crusty frames, this frame's real clean, but a lot of times in old crusty frames, it's enough old dried grease that's turned into wax or dirt or rust inside the threads, I tap them out. So if you get to a place where you're going to put these bolts in an old frame, they will not go in. Could be damaged on the threads, run a tap through there. I have other videos on how to use taps, how to run taps through all the things on a bike. Go watch them. My videos are cool. Yep. Alright, so sliding this dude on. Little three-way action, little lining it right up. Gentle, no tension, no pressure. Needs to go in several threads, totally smooth, otherwise you need to run a tap. I want to look. That looks pretty even. You see, as I just over tightened it, this whole thing bowed. We don't want that bow. I want it to sit right where we want it to sit. So I'll kind of hold it down so it won't bow. So I can finish tightening it. And that looks pretty dang good. I want to give a little pinch, this one overbent. So I'm lining up my eyes right here to see the tire and the outside line of the fender. So I want this fender to sit real even with the same amount of space on both sides. So the tire, 5 millimeters of dead air, and then the outside of the fender. And that's how we know it's kissed and on there perfectly. And the front is lying to us. It might be... just gotta bend it on this little spacer we put in there. Taking that tension off. That looks pretty good. I might have to do a little final tweaking with all this plastic off and with the rack on and stuff to get this perfectly aligned and straight and even and, square in all the planes. Not like this, not way over. I want it to look good all the way around, but especially at the bottom and the top. Swing this bike out. Take our Sharpay. I'm going to mark this side. We're not going to just cut this one exactly the same as the other one. Usually that's probably fine, but I don't trust it. I'm going to line it up myself, make my Sharpie mark. Then we can take this cut off piece from the other side and hold it up and see if they're the same. And they are not. So I marked this one in several millimeters. So real close, but not exactly the same. And I do not see a reason to cut it a little bit longer. And if anything, this is saying cut it shorter. And it's already shorter. So I'm not gonna cut it where I marked it. We're gonna trust it. The other side's a little too long, so this side's a little too short. It'll be just right. A little mini tubing bender. I'll line this cutting blade up with my Sharpie mark. And no one can see both sides at once, and no one's getting down to the tape measure, so One's 2 millimeters longer, the other doesn't matter. We can always cut a couple extra millimeters off the other side if we decide this isn't lined up right, there's too much gap. If anything, we might put some extra spacers in here one day. So he wants to run even smaller tires on this. The crazy person. Just make even more daylight. Fine tune that with an extra washer or two in there. Or a thick cut piece of old scrap leather or something. Twisting the night away. And yes, Sharpie is oh, and it snapped. Alright, this is off. I even cut it a little long out of paranoia. Sharpie, we're using Sharpie on the fenders, and I should have addressed this a second ago. Yes, it's a permanent marker. Is it permanent? No, not at all. Rubbing alcohol will take most Sharpie off most things. If it won't, you can take the Sharpie's got a solvent in it to let it flow out onto the material you're marking up. You can add some fresh Sharpie over an old line that won't come up, and then rub it off with some rubbing alcohol, and that'll usually get rid of it 100%. So, permanent in a good way, not permanent in an even better way when you need to move. Looking back here, see I'm tightening this right down, and nothing's changed. It still has perfect gap on both sides. It still looks great. It's just on there. It's kissing. These stays are holding it in place where we want it, and it's not putting it under any weird tensions or pressures. The same thing, it's going to try and buckle down as I tighten it. Righty-tighty, it's going to go down, so I'm going to just kind of hold it and keep it straight so I'm not adding any weird tensions in. Beautiful. Got like 2 or 3 millimeters sticking out. So in case we need to adjust it back, there's room. You can always cut it shorter, you cannot cut it longer. But most of these brands, especially Velo Orange, they sell extra sets of these stays. And they're like, I think they're like 16 bucks or something. So not free, but if you really mangle these, it's not a big deal. You can order another set. Now let's make sure. See, so this one's sticking out so far, it is touching this quick release. This side is not. So I might really cut this side down. I went paranoid, making it a little extra long, because it's been 5 or 6 years since I did this. But I'm definitely going to come in here and I'm going to whack. This has got more clearance than we need down here. I'm going to come down and whack these extra couple of millimeters off. The tubing cutter is kind of a brat for cutting so close to the edge. It's got these little wheels in here to support the edge. It doesn't like that. We'll see if we can do it. If not, we'll pull it off and hacksaw it and hand file it and all that stuff. But this is hitting. That's just too tight. We gotta fix it. No being lazy. Now in theory, we should just be able to loosen this up and have this slide right out. Let's see if we can just take a couple mils off of this whole thing, just jam it up and give us a hard time. It seems like it's working. I just cut long out of paranoia. I'm not doing this for a decade. And I don't really have any spare parts here. I could run to the store tomorrow, but slow me down. At the shop, I kept extra spares of all the different metal Fender brand stays, hardware. I had it all for emergencies and for selling to people. I had a big old hardware wall. I had a 4x8 sheet of wood with a frame we built around it. A pegboard with just little bits of hardware. It was covering every inch of it. It was heaven if you needed something. Guys would come down from Seattle and say that Northern Cycles was Seattle's best bike shop, just inconveniently located in Portland. And I just buzzed off just a little teeny tiny chunk. And with any luck, it'll be exactly the right length and not interfere with that quick release. Okay, for the front rack, I'd usually put the wheel back in, all that stuff, but we did just move it. I'm going to put the wheel back in. Wheel is back in. It does not interfere. Oh. And this did move. This does need to come forward just a little teeny bit. Yeah, moved it forward like a millimeter. Everything's all centered and lined up again. This is all centered and lined up. It looks good all the way around. This is definitely slightly off, so we're going to do some bending and tweaking on it. Tightening these bolts down. So we've got the Rene Hurst double-sided rack mount bolt. So it is a canty bolt to hold your canty in place with some threads coming out the front to hold the rack. Oh, we got that in place too, and it's tight, it's not going to want to come out. Lol, 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 lol. And it's too short. I want to see how it fits. That's what I thought. This one looks pretty flush. This one looks like it's pointed out a little bit. Backing in without going too far and too crazy. And that looks crazy to me. Sometimes I'll bolt them on the bike and give them a yank. This needs to come in. It's lining up on the bolt up here. This is telling me things I don't want to hear. It's like veering off this way on the wheel. I want it to come over. Usually bolting it on and then going and just yanking it when it's all bolted down is really the rightest thing to do. So we're probably going to do that next. But we're going to get this bolt out and bolt this rack on correctly. This bolt is in wicked tight because that diorama is all tightened, so we're going to loosen that nut. Just a little bit loose, and then this should, in theory, come out fairly easily. And this thing is like exactly the right length if we hate ourselves. This crown is a half round. It really needs a half round spacer. So it's flat on this side and half round on that side, like a brake spacer. And I'm going to see if I have a real thin one to put in there and a slightly longer bolt to make up for it. Alright, this is my dilemma. I got brand new M6 bolts. I never have anything that's what I want. I always want something that's like 2 threads longer. Everything's always at least a 1/4 inch longer. So we'll try it out. Here's the little half round I was talking about. So it's a half round to cup that round crown with a flat on this side. This bolt's so long I have another one of those I can put on the back. It's also half round the back. Technically I should use them. They're aluminum, they don't weigh anything. I've got different ones, thin. These ones are all brand new and shiny and nice. I've got a big fat nylock and a nice washer. So we can make everything pretty and matches and nice. I do not like this design. You can't get an Allen wrench on this bolt. I might go see if why would I have some that take like a regular flat wrench, hex wrench. This we get in here on the side with a regular wrench. My knees are sore. At the shop I had a rolling stool for getting around fenders and doing a little fiddly stuff down low. It's nice. I don't have that here. So here is just a regular hex head bolt. It's the same length. It's got a screwdriver end in the middle, but really this is so you can come in and grab it with a small wrench and hold the wrench flats while you're tightening it on the back. This is just going to spin because the way this thing is designed, you can't get an Allen wrench on here. You just can't do it. Maybe kinda you could get one in there at an angle, a ball socket one. Maybe this is a Rinko bike. It's for bike packing and touring. I don't want to booby trap someone needing special extra tools. You're going to have a little adjustable wrench. You can get that adjustable wrench straight down and grab these wrench flats. Or you can get a screwdriver at a real crooked angle if you want. And it's kind of more old style. And it's got the old style lock nut, which I may or may not use. It is M6, so I can use a regular nylock, which is what I prefer. So bolt in, little half round. Now, this is the really hard part. I gotta get the diorama back up into place. Oh, of course. Wires love being right in your way. Diorama back up into place and straight and get this bolt through, all without being able to see anything and fighting this big heavy rack. So what I'm going to do is put the rack on. I'm going to use these little nuts just to hold the rack so it doesn't go flying all the way off. It's barely finger tight. Now I'm going to line it up from this side. Oh, hey! That looks nice. Now, do I want to just use a nylock and a washer? Yeah, I think that'll be fine. You really want, with these nylocks, you need the nut to poke all the way through and cut into this little white stuff. So the bolt needs to poke through a good at least one thread. Otherwise you're really not doing anything. So it's going to come loose. What size are you, little bolt? Are you a 10? Perhaps my favorite size? Hey, you are wonderful. The back should be a 10 as well. So this is why I did this nut, because I can just hold it on the top, kind of from the side, get down here with a 10 on the back, bolt this rack down. This fender's so short I can't hard mount the front. I guess I don't have to do that extra step on this bike. I guess. Hey, look at that. It's tightened down, my little spacer's working. There's like 2 or 3 threads poking out the back. It's everything I've ever wanted. Put that back on and tight. Put the front wheel back in. Make sure everything looks straight with the fender. Doesn't move the fender a bunch. Straight. So now this rack looks crooked. It's pointing over here. It's getting straighter. Let's change angles from the top. It's real close, bro. The whole frame's flexing, but it's coming back and only the rack is getting weird, so that looks pretty dang straight. God, this Tanaka fender is so short. I am definitely not recommending them for rando bikes. Yeah, without this fender sticking I want it to come to here, honestly. Without sticking out at least another inch or 2, I can't mount to the rack. We're calling it good enough. So that is the front fender. I probably filled up my phone completely. Stop and edit this down. This might be part 1. And if it is, thanks for watching. Maybe Rinko should be part 2. I don't know. We'll see. This is probably hours of footage. I'm going to have to try to edit it down to like 20 or 30 minutes. We'll see. Thanks for watching.